Now, Marina Purkiss is a left-wing commentator who has got a podcast, a platform on Byline Times and Byline TV. She's on quite a lot, and as much as she talks a lot about Brexit, which is something that I really don't have the time to spend a lot of time talking about, although I do touch on the issue sometimes, for example, as a constitutional matter, I agree with her on a great many things, and I think she should spend more time talking about economics, but overall I think she's a really good communicator. Now, one person who I don't like is Jacob Rees-Mogg, who is Tory MP, haunted Victorian pencil, and now presenter of his own show on GB News. She went on and debated with Jacob Rees-Mogg, talking about Brexit, talking about cultural issues, talking about the general failures of the Conservative Party. And people have been talking about this. It's all online, so hopefully this will have pretty high click-through rate. And we should be interesting to cover what goes on in this discussion and to see how good an impression she makes debating on a very hostile platform. We shall see. I've seen lots of different takes on whether it's bad or good. I will reserve judgment.
Reported today that the Oxford University LGBTQ plus society has called for the Oxford Union Debating Society to rescind its offer to former philosophy professor Kathleen Stock. The group released a statement expressing its dismay.
Yeah, based. Yeah, if they are clients, they are buying a product from the university, right? You guys wanted to turn universities into a business rather than a public service, right? You wanted them to be clients and not students. They are buying a product, and they have told you that the product that they want does not include people like Kathleen Stock. Okay, brilliant. You know, that's how being a consumer works.
That a transphobic speaker would be invited as she disregards the welfare of LGBTQ plus students. The Oxford Union is a bastion of free speech. I was an officer when I attended the university, and I'm now a trustee of the parent charity, so I'm delighted that the Oxford Union is sticking to its guns, because Ms Stock isn't a hateful person. She has merely expressed scepticism about gender ideology.
Yeah, she's definitely not a hateful person. She's definitely not implied plenty of things that would try and imply that trans people are somehow this massive danger to women in general. Right? She's definitely not tried to castigate an entire group of people as being uniquely a danger to women or anything like that. No, she never implied anything like that at all.
But I'm now joined by the...
Also, disinviting someone to speak on your platform is not the same as being anti-free speech, right? Free speech is when the state does not stop you from saying things you want through force of the law. It doesn't mean private institutions wanting to or not associating with people they do or don't like, right? Private institutions and public institutions are different things. I know, crazy idea that maybe the public and the private sector might be slightly different with regards to how they should or shouldn't operate.
The political commentator, Marina Purkiss, who, as I understand it, Marina, you don't think the cultural wars really exist? You think they're essentially a right-wing...
Oh, no, I think they exist because people like you and your party in government, they desperately need them to exist, because what else are you going to win the next election on?
So they're not coming from people who want to pull roads down or want to edit Roald Dahl. Isn't there a battle of ideas?
The edit of the edit of Roald Dahl was done like fucking years ago, ages ago. And it's just someone noticed that things were different from the original copy that they had, and they thought that it was some kind of recent cancellation thing, when really it wasn't. In the same way that Dr. Seuss's books got rewritten like ages ago. I mean, there's been plenty of books that have been rewritten or they've been restyled, given there are plenty of old books from new writers that we would venerate now that had pretty racist depictions of black people in them. But those things got altered, decades and decades ago, so that they could then go back go back into print, go back into circulation, for example, to reflect the changing times. And it feels like the boomers have only just noticed this.
Ideas that is going on that sometimes get expressed in extreme form.
So what I think's happened is it's a distraction technique. So don't get me wrong, I think any calls to rewrite Roald Dahl, for example, or to rename a street. By the way, the street renaming, if we go into that, it was called Black Boy Lane. That was why they renamed the street. I think that's fair enough. If you had a street named, White Trash, you might want to rename it. But I think what's happening here is you're drawing attention to these things that...
No, I think you'll find that renaming incredibly racist street names, Marina, that's literally George Formby 1974.
...actually don't impact people's lives. And the reason you're doing that is because otherwise people might just focus on the real grievances in their life, which are basically caused by your government.
But doesn't no platforming actually affect people's lives? Because freedom of speech is absolutely essential for the political discussion that we're going to have.
Jacob, but do you know what really impacts people's lives? And I really would just ask your viewers, you probably dislike me if you know who I am, but just ask your viewers to think about what really impacts their life. Is it Roald Dahl being rewritten, which, by the way, I don't think it should be? Is it the renaming of a street? Is it, I don't know, some woke policy? Is that really what's harming people? Or...
And obviously there's the nonsense free speech claim there, but she is right indeed that it is being used as a distraction technique. Although I will point out there's in YouTube chat specifically saying that no one's watching GBBs, then their viewing figures are virtually zero. That doesn't matter to GB News. The reason why their viewing figures are low is because the ratings that you get for things like GB News are very low, specifically on terrestrial. It's not specifically for terrestrial viewing, right? It's not for the kind of news that people are going to be putting on in the same way they'd put on BBC News or Sky News, for example, to actually see headlines. I mean, they argued as much in their case against Ofcom regarding being treated as a current affairs entertainment programme and not a news programme, despite what the name may or may not say. Specifically because it's about opinion pieces. It's about a commentary rather than actually reporting the news in a fair and balanced manner. And the reason why it is that is because it's not for terrestrial, it's for the internet, right? It's for Twitter, it's for YouTube, it's for Facebook, it's for Instagram, it's for all of these clips to go viral on social media. It's an ideological loss leader that, the Legatum Foundation, Marshall Wace, all of this dark money that gets pushed into this to try and spread their ideological chops, for example. And that's why Marina is right in that not only do the Conservative Party themselves run on these cultural issues to avoid the fact that they cannot run on the economy anymore because the economy is completely screwed up, specifically by Conservative policy for the last 45 years, and because of the Liz Truss budget that openly crashed the economy, and not just for regular people who live normal lives, but interest rates went up, so mortgage payments for the well-off also increased too. So it's not just the small bubble of downtrodden poor people that are being affected by this, it's middle-class people in the country as well. They got affected, so now they have no economic drops whatsoever, because everyone apart from the super rich has been affected by the failures of their economic policy at this point. So they have to pivot to something else to be able to distract people. But fundamentally, it's not just the Tory party as a political party that do this, but their friends in the media, for example, will also use this as a distraction technique. First of all, to try and play into whatever thing the Conservatives are doing with economic policy, but specifically to manufacture consent for their economic policies by proxy as well. Think tanks do this too, right? You'll have seen the IAA and Policy Exchange. If you look at their YouTube channels, they've had interviews with all of the gender-critical people. Kathleen Stock, Graham Linehan, Lottie Moore, who actually works for Policy Exchange as well, doing these studies to try and turn the conversation to being around trans people, for example. And you will have seen Helen Joyce has been interviewed by the Institute of Economic Affairs as well. Like, this is the Institute of Economic Affairs. Only in 2021, they hired a cultural commentator called Mark Glendenning, who originally worked for Policy Exchange as some kind of nebulous law professor who worked around the European Court of Justice, I believe it was. So these are people who are usually concerned with economics, but they know their economic principles are completely being repudiated by the entirety of the rest of the country. They have to smuggle in their economic ideology by proxy, by focusing on conservative issues based upon social issues, for example, the woke stuff, for example. And this is why they have gone down the road of platforming all these anti-trans people, because they want to pull left-wing women over on the idea that you can't be left-wing anymore because they've abandoned the rights of women because they think that trans people should be treated with a basic level of humanity, for example. And again, this Mark Glendenning person was only hired in 2021, right? It's only recently that these economic think tanks have pivoted to talking about culture war stuff because they know they cannot at all sell their economic ideology anymore because people just aren't buying it.
Is it the concern that they are going to be waiting for an ambulance and dying? Is it the concern that their children are getting a poor education? Is it the concern that we've got the highest energy bills on the planet?
But isn't this why you should stand up for freedom of speech? Because if you attack freedom of speech in some areas, you're then putting the government in control of the agenda. You're deciding politicians should.
Mr. Freedom of Speech here, did you or did you not vote to stop people protesting if it was annoying?
Well, there are limits on protest, but,
okay.
but
So
public
free speech is
protest
a lot
is...
Okay, well, there should be limits on protest, limits on who can and can't speak at a private institution. Like, I think, personally, if you ask me, private institutions deciding who they do or don't want a platform, or who they do or don't want to have a conversation with, is far more a question of individual choices than the democratic right within a democracy to protest and not have your not be essentially criminalized by the state. The whole point of freedom of speech, that it is about the power of the state and not about the decisions that private institutions do or don't make. And that's really a great point by Marina Purkiss there, in the one of these is a free speech issue, and that's protest. Who the Oxford Union do or don't want to actually platform, and there's in the debating society, for example, that is not an issue of free speech at all. That's an issue of freedom of association.
Because I'm okay with it.
No, public protest is a very important part of freedom of speech, and the laws that have been introduced are to get the balance right between people going about their daily lives. That's perfectly reasonable.
You tell me how freedom of speech is going to make people's lives better in this country after it's been decimated by things like your Brexit.
Because it's really important. Because
True. No amount of political freedom will satisfy the hungry masses. So true. And depends, how you're going to satisfy those hungry masses, for example. Are you going to satisfy them with cultural bullshit or by actually suiting their material needs?
it allows you to come on this programme and make your case. And that once you...
Sorry, me making my case on this programme,
yes,
which I'll never come back on, is just so that people understand that this is not going to help them. Freedom of speech is not going to help you pay your bills. It's not going to put food on the table. It's not going to feed your kids.
But it allows you to make the...
And the thing is, she shouldn't specifically be arguing this, right? This is the wrong line to go down, in that she shouldn't be saying that freedom of speech is bad or that it's unnecessary, right? She should be specifically pinning him down on the idea that private institutions should be able to have freedom of association, which is also something that should be enshrined in law, freedom of association, right? Unlike what Jacob Rees-Mogg she's rightly pointed out already, just 5 minutes ago, what he supports within his party about criminalising the basic democratic right to protest, and which again would be punished by the state, which is a freedom of speech issue.
The argument that you're making.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
So fundamentally
All I'm
important.
here to do is to draw attention to the fact that what you do is
but that is freedom of speech.
It's fraud.
So it's really important to defend freedom of speech and protect it.
Your freedom of speech, all you do is you use your platform. And I can't believe you do this. Like, you were born into a life of privilege, Jacob, and you decided to be a con man, to lie to people who trust
I use my platform so that people like you have freedom of speech too, because I think it's really important.
I don't need you to defend my freedom of speech.
Make your
I need
case.
you to be in a position of
But
government.
the left don't like this, do they? That's why people are trying to stop
I didn't even realise I was on the
this
left.
lady going to the Oxford Union.
I just realised it was a decent person, not some massive lefty. I just realised what you lot are doing in government is disgusting. And you lie and you lie, and you've got no contrition for what you've done to people. Your Brexit, do you care?
Well, people voted for Brexit. That's democracy.
Of course they did. I'm surprised I didn't vote for Brexit, given what you promised.
You think you know better than the British people?
I think you lied.
But there's also, again, what's frustrating is there's no discussion about the kind of Brexit that was had, or the rhetoric leading up to the vote, the referendum, and then also the rhetoric afterwards as well, right? In that you look at, for example, things like Nigel Farage was saying, things like Daniel Hannan, there's no desire for them to leave the single market, for example, or the customs union, or they would want to get some Norway-style EFTA deal, for example, after leaving the European Union, having won the vote, and then once the vote actually happened, and it was a very slightly positive in favour of leaving the European Union, which I agree should absolutely have been honoured through the democratic process, right? That should have been honoured, leaving the European Union. But given how close the vote was, the idea that we had to go full-scale, hardest of hard Brexit, which is what Jacob Rees-Mogg supported, right? He specifically supported it because he wants the kind of economic libertarian type stuff that was essentially being pushed by Liz Truss, the budget that broke the country's economy. Despite the fact that there should be some kind of compromise position about leaving the European Union, but with some EU things intact, for example, so that you could bring the country together on a compromise position. To be fair, neither party from this wanted to do that. The Remainers wanted to literally ignore the result of the referendum, and the Brexiteers wanted to completely scrap anything to do with the European Union, regardless of how close the vote was, right? They believe that any connection to the European Union whatsoever, even after leaving, was not good enough. And that is the reason for A, why people were lying beforehand, and B, why we see such a gigantic economic malaise at the moment, because there was no compromise position.
To people, and they believed you.
I think the
You
British
t- you
people are more
told
intelligent than that. The British people weighed up
Are you telling me they should have
Brexit.
not, Are you telling me they should have known?
I do think it's really it's patronising to say that nobody knows what they were voting for, but it's also it's also kind of also similarly patronising to say, I can't believe you would say that we'd lie to people. Are you saying the British public are too easy to hoodwink? As if that's all. That's kind of a different kind of patronisation, right? And also a very Weasley way of getting out the fact that he literally did lie, and people did indeed lie through all of that, continually. And you will show them their lies, and they will ignore and will repudiate the fact that you have shown them that.
To know you were a liar.
I wasn't a liar.
So when you said to them,
all you're doing is mere abuse. You're not making any arguments.
Tell me how I'm wrong. Okay, tell me I'm wrong. Let me ask you a question.
When
you said to people that Brexit was going to bring cheaper food,
it will.
Clothes, footwear and drink. So it will.
All this is in progress. Joining the CTPPP, the free trade deal with Australia, the free.
The CPTPP, the thing that's given us like 5% of the same amount of GDP that you would have gotten from that we have lost from leaving the European Union, right? What gigantic economic gains are we going to get by giving a free trade agreement with fucking Vietnam over a trade deal with all of the countries that live on our doorstep? Nonsense, complete nonsense. And again, just misdirection. But, you know, I said before, and I'll say it again, there was the Brexit debate that I watched the other day, and I will reiterate this point once more, is the economic malaise that we are seeing is predominantly because of neoliberalism, right? It's predominantly through the right-wing economic policies that we've had for the last 45 years, no less. Now, the reason why these people like Jacob Rees-Mogg wanted Brexit was to try and have more of these economic policies, make it even more right-wing, to turn it into a libertarian style rather than neoliberal economy, for example, to completely strip back the powers of the state and completely strip back the protection of people like working people, for example. But that doesn't mean that because we were in the European Union beforehand, it meant that that economic model worked, or that we didn't have a right-wing economic model in our country, that we tried to which we tried to fix with Jeremy Corbyn in 2017, for example. If Jeremy Corbyn had won in 2017, we would have still left the European Union, but we would have rebuilt some kind of post-war social democratic consensus that would have fixed the economic damage of 40 years of neoliberalism. Obviously, we didn't get that, but you can't blame all of this on Brexit, even though Brexit was precipitated by those kinds of economic policies and the people who also support those economic policies too.
Trade deal with New Zealand, all of these are bringing in lower tariffs on food coming into this country.
Ask, what do you
this
think?
is already.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to get cheaper food from Australia, cheaper Vegemite. Think of the Tim Tams, Sally Dev. Where are we going to be getting Tim Tams from? Were it not be us joining the CPTPP?
In the
what
pipeline.
do you think's going to happen at the end of this year when those full Brexit checks are going to come into play? Do you remember the ones this time last year you said were an act of self-harm?
Yes, I stopped them. That's right.
They're coming in this year.
Well, there is no reason.
What's going to happen then?
There is no reason to bring those in. Those should be stopped again.
They're coming
and that
in.
is with it.
That's the Brexit.
The government can stop that. No, not at all. That is. If the government wishes to put those controls on, that is an act of a democratic government. Do I think they're foolish? Yes, of course I do. That's why I tried to stop them, succeeded in stopping them last year. I'm not in government, I'm a member of the Conservative Party.
That is the Brexit. Yeah,
but why is it that food inflation is higher in the EU average than it is in the UK? We're doing better than the EU.
Why didn't you compare us? Because I saw the other day you compared us to Austria for inflation. Great comparison there.
Actually, if you look at the countries in Europe that have the lowest food inflation, it's the Nordic countries, for example. And you look at, let's say, Finland or Norway, they have 30-40% of grocery retail as consumer cooperatives, where prices are kept deliberately low to make sure that the consumers get the best deal on things like groceries, to make sure that food inflation does not rise too much, because it removes a lot of the price gouging that is causing a lot of the issues with food inflation and general inflation across the Eurozone and across the UK as well. But actually, the specific area of Europe where food inflation is at its lowest is the place with the most kind of left-leaning economy. Again, they're still talking about the European Union versus the UK, Brexit versus Remain, when this is an issue of neoliberalism versus social democracy.
It is a great comparison.
Oh, wonderful. Why on
Our
earth
food inflation
would you-
is lower than Germany.
Why would you compare us to Austria, who have the highest inflation, one of the highest inflations in the world, and also their GDP is in the billions, ours is in the trillions. Why then
Our
would
food,
you...
our food inflation is lower than Germany.
Why?
So actually, I'm happy to take a variety of comparisons. Why Austria? Austria is renowned for its economic caution. There's a whole school of Austrian economists who are famous for economic caution.
Why don't you compare us to other comparable countries in the G7? Tell your viewers why our food costs are soaring and why they're going to continue to soar.
Our food costs are rising by less than the average for the EU and less than by Germany. So that's not too bad, is it?
No, it's going up. Why are our energy bills the highest on the planet?
Well, when I was in government, we made the biggest intervention to help people with their energy bills.
By not taxing the energy company, by giving the energy companies who are making the windfall profits that is being paid for by the government, right? It's being paid for through quantitative easing, essentially, to give the money, the windfall profits, to the energy companies who are the ones doing the price gouging on our energy bills, right? Because it's the extractors that are making all the money, and they're taking gas out of the North Sea in the form of places like Centrica and Shell, whatever it might be. And we're the ones paying for it through quantitative easing, rather than doing a windfall tax on these windfall profits. Or, say, for example, having a state-owned gas extractor in the North Sea. Also a solution to this thing.
That's not what I'm asking. Why are they the highest?
That's by his own metrics, right? His own metric for what is a good or not a good economy is, for example, the debt to GDP ratio, right? We're at 92% of debt to GDP ratio, which is over the metric that the Reinhardt and Rogoff study would say would lead us to have no higher than 1.5% growth, right? That by their own metrics, ones that I do not believe in, I think these are incorrect metrics, but by their own metrics, they are making economic damage that they could be alleviating through more interventionist policy. But they are deliberately protecting energy profits by A, giving them the ability to be able to invest their way out of paying the windfall taxes in the first place, and B, by paying for the energy price guarantee through quantitative easing and through increasing the national debt rather than through windfall taxation. Just shows you where their priorities lie. And even then, like, even after all of the money that they've put in to keeping energy bills low or lower through the energy price guarantee, we still have the highest bills in Europe. We still have the highest bills in Europe.
Highest on the planet.
The energy bills in the UK have gone up because of our green policies.
Oh, okay.
That has led to a very significant increase.
Nothing to do with the Conservative.
The green policies are the one keeping bills down. The reason why bills are high is because we spend huge amounts of money because of the increase in global wholesale gas prices due to the lack of supply now that the taps have been stopped and cut off from Russia, for example. So we have this, the gas market is now loads of gas coming from Norway, coming from outside the Eurozone and not coming from Russia anymore. So the overall supply is lower. Supply-demand curve, obviously, that's how markets work. The price of the commodity goes up. It's very simple economics. And the fact that so much of our economy is dependent for energy bills on gas rather than on renewables is why that's led to huge amounts of increase in our energy bills. If a lower proportion of our national grid was taking their electricity from generation through gas, which again is specifically a large part of our electricity generation mix, because of the neoliberal policies passed by the Thatcher administration during the 80s that privatized huge swathes of our energy market, for example, the reason why we have such a large gas proportion of our energy generation is because they were the cheapest to get set up to compete with British Gas once they lost their monopoly in the 90s. So loads of cheap start-off gas power plants took over our energy generation market, which is why we're so reliant on it and why our bills are so high. If we had, for example, actually changed to be a greener economy that relied more on renewables, 30 years ago, right? New Labour are just as much to blame from this as the Conservatives are. If we'd properly had an energy transition and shut down these stupid gas power plants, our energy bills would be way lower. If we'd moved to have more insulation, which was promised in the Jeremy Corbyn manifesto, our bills would be way lower, right? If we had moved to more electrical style heaters rather than having all of our houses heated with gas, our bills would be lower. If we remained in the European single market and had access to their deals that they've had with Norway over ensuring that gas prices do stay lower than they otherwise would have been within the Eurozone, for example, our bills would be lower. These are all things that are a combination of neoliberalism, a combination of privatization, and a combination of Brexit that have made our energy bills the highest in Europe and the highest one of the highest in the world, as Marina rightly points out. But it's frustrating that she's not bringing this up. That she's not bringing up the economic policy. It's all about Brexit. And that's where she's failed in this discussion so far.
Failures year after year after year.
It's nothing to do with Brexit.
No, I'm not blaming Brexit for that.
No,
actually.
absolutely nothing to do with Brexit.
But
what was I trying to do? I was trying to reduce prices by fracking, by shale gas.
Fracking, here we
Oh yeah, that shale gas that would come online 3 years from now. Yeah, brilliant. I'm sure that will really deal with the current cost of living crisis.
go again. Here we go.
Using our resources.
Fracking. Do you want to tell people how long it would take to get any sort of benefit from fracking? How teeny tiny that benefit would be, and the fact that it would do absolutely nothing.
We're potentially sitting on trillions of cubic feet of gas underneath us. I'm not. There are very good geological studies showing this.
That doesn't matter. That does not matter because she's right. Again, another point she's correct on, but she's not actually properly expanding on, is that if we did start extracting a small amount of shale gas, even if it was immediate, right? Even if it was immediately we were extracting shale gas, then that would be sold. That would almost certainly, under the Conservatives, and probably under the Labour Party as well, be being done by a private company, therefore taking additional gas and just putting it out into the market, into the wholesale market, at the same price as what already is. What do you think a small amount of shale gas is going to increase the supply so greatly you'll have a massive drop in wholesale gas prices within the common market? No, of course it wouldn't. That's nonsense, right? It's the supply and the demand issue is based upon the entirety of the gas that is available within the market. A tiny amount of British shale gas entering that market is not going to bring prices down. If, for example, I disagree with it on environmental grounds, for example. I disagree with fracking that it would fuck up water supplies. It would lead to environmental impacts with regards to tremors in the areas in which the fracking would be done. It almost certainly would find it very difficult to get consent of the population who live nearby to engage in shale gas extraction through hydraulic fracturing. But if you, for example, did that with a state-owned enterprise that could then take that gas and then put it into a state-owned electricity provider, into a state-owned national grid, right? Where all the state would therefore be paying for, instead of wholesale gas prices, people would only be paying for the overall cost that the state would be engaging in by doing the extraction, doing the generation, and doing the energy delivery. That would reduce people's gas bills, right? That was what would reduce people's energy bills, is if they were paying just for the overheads that the state was engaging in by extracting the shale gas. But of course, that's not going to happen if it's a private company, because they're going to be selling it on the common market. Really interesting difference between a private company and public company, for example. Although at least now we're outside of the European Union, although we are inside the CPTPP now, so that's gone now, is that we can't actually interfere with markets deliberately using state-owned enterprises anymore, because of the competition rules in the CPTPP, which the worst part about it, as far as I'm concerned as a leftist, is that now we cannot interfere too heavily with markets and price signals by prioritising state-owned enterprises within these markets, which is, again, the failure of neoliberalism. Like, the whole point of state-owned enterprises is that you're supposed to use them to interfere with markets. Right? You're supposed to use them to interfere with price signals, to make things better for consumers at the expense of owners. That's the whole point, and now we can't do it anymore.
Do you believe your lies?
All you say when you disagree is that somebody is lying. But this isn't
You are lying. You literally are lying. Although, I'm not sure what she's going to say. She's going to properly expand on this. But we shall see. We shall see.
A political argument.
You've been proven time and time again. And you never say, do you know what? I'm really sorry. I told you that everything was going to be better and cheaper, and it's not.
The thing is, she's not pressing him on the question that he asked him. Right? The question that he asked him was, how long is it going to take for the shale gas to come online to reduce people's bills now? And he's pivoted. He's answered a different question to what was asked. And she's not pressuring him on the question that she originally asked. But you just need to get people who know how to debate into these debates. This is exactly the same problem that we had with Aaron Bastani and Matt Goodwin, where even though Matt Goodwin made points that were incorrect, that, overall, I think the kind of broad portion of the debate, we kind of knew they were incorrect. But there was no point at which pivots were called out, the gish gallops were interrupted. You allow them to take control of the conversation, to move the goalposts, to pivot to different issues, rather than fundamentally getting them to answer the question that you originally asked in the first place, and B, being able to use the Socratic methods to be able to get them to intuit their positions to people, rather than relying on faulty assumptions.
Agree with me. But that's not the same as somebody lying. Disagreement is perfectly reasonable.
Sorry, if you promise something If you promise something and it doesn't materialise, that's a lie.
What I promised about tariffs on food is true. They are being reduced with the free trade agreements that we've been negotiating.
Should we revisit that
really
at the end of this year when your act of self-harm comes into play?
Well, that would be madness if the government does that, and I shall oppose that very strongly.
OK, let's go. Why don't we...
why would...
The CPTPP allows for state-owned enterprises. It does allow for them, but it doesn't allow for them to be prioritised within the market by the state. It has to compete within the market as normal with the remainder of the private companies within that market. You can't use them to distort price signals. You can't give them preferential treatment. And that is literally the entire point of the state-owned enterprise. That's literally the entire point.
Let's go back to woke, right? Because you want to talk about woke culturables. I read your fascinating...
No, she's pivoting rather than actually pressing him on the issues. Like, I think there was a couple of points where she was really good in the kind of points that she was making, but I do think this is a poor performance. I'm not going to lie. I do think this is a poor performance from what Martin Arnold said in chat earlier.
Article with Frost in The Telegraph. That's a great person to partner with, by the way.
It is. He's a very great man, very distinguished figure. Responsible, wise, good...
Shoddy deal that now no one likes, by the way. No one's happy with this.
No, he did.
So well done, great partner.
He got out of the European Union. He did a good negotiation with the EU.
Literally no one is happy with this. Brexiteers are not happy with this deal.
Well, I don't think that's right. Okay. I think the Brexiteers are very happy that we're out of the European Union. In this article, you talked about how anti-woke policies are going to help recover the country. Whitney's recovering, right? Your guess is as good as mine. Now, how are your anti-woke policies going to help restore the economy, for example? Explain it. Well, we want supply-side reform. We want the economy to get to higher levels of growth.
And
this is really important. We don't want people distracted by all the wokeness. We've got only a small amount of time. Well, as we were discussing earlier...
But you're creating the distractions by making it an issue, by talking about inconsequential shit. Like, do you think that Byline Times, which Marina Purkiss represents, who I have, mixed opinions on, right? I think their way they cover the left is ridiculous, but they do good work covering the failures of the Conservative government. Do you think they're spending their entire time talking about woke stuff, for example? No, they're talking about policy, they're talking about economics. Where do you think all of the consent is being manufactured to make whether or not woke stuff is bad or not part of the discussion? It's all coming from Jacob Rees-Mogg's side.
£140,000, small amount of money in itself, being wasted by the Cabinet Office. That's part of the point.
140. Yeah, but sorry, we're talking about fixing the economy, and you've just quoted 140,000
I'm talking about things that are symptomatic of the problems of the waste within the government.
When Jacob talks about deregulation, that's a big thing. You're all about deregulation. What Jacob is talking about is scaling back your workers' rights and consumer rights.
I'm afraid we're going to have to draw this to a conclusion, but you're wrong on that because our employment...
She's literally correct. Like, the person who you supported to be leader of the Conservative Party was Liz Truss, who, as soon as she came into power, deliberately tried to make it so that they could scale back the working time directive. That was one of the main policies that her and Kwasi Kwarteng were talking about, with things that they could theoretically change after leaving the European Union, for example. And one of the main policies that Jeremy Hunt is doing, like things like revoking Solvency II, is to try and get rid of the capital controls and the prudential regulation that is necessary on things like banks and insurance companies and pension funds, for example, to stop them engaging in the risky investments for cheap financialized growth that these people have relied on as the source of main growth in this country for the last 45 years. Which would be the same things that caused the global financial crisis in 2008. And that's what the deregulation is about. Obviously, there are some workers' rights they are trying to get rid of, and I think she's correct in noticing that. But you also got to understand where the financial deregulation comes from is by prioritising financial sector growth over the growth of working people and workers' wages, which I think is a more pertinent thing that they're trying to do. Because if they tried like a mass scale back of workers' rights, the bonfire of regulation, as these people try and describe it, Jacob Rees-Mogg is very famous for wanting the bonfire of regulations. A lot of it is to do with regulations on the financial sector that were implemented in the wake of the financial crisis.
Rights all predate the European Union,
didn't even want minimum
by and
wage.
large.
In 2011,
but unfortunately, we've got to go straight to the weather. We've overrun. But the sun will no doubt be shining in Somerset.
I think you can't have these debates in 10 minutes as well. I mean, and I think that Jacob Rees-Mogg did indeed come off better in that debate because you need to have someone who knows how to debate in these instances, right? Because if all you're doing is just stating a bunch of incorrect shit, right, just lying, Purkiss pointed out quite rightly in this debate, if all you're doing is just saying out there, spouting whatever manufactured talking points that you have and lying about it constantly, dealing in misinformation over and over and over again, essentially have a machine gun loaded with bullshit, is you have to have somebody who knows how to counter them. But to make those points, you don't have to be any good at debating at all. And unless you have someone who knows how to counter that, it makes you look much better within the discussion. You have control of the conversation. And I think Marina did okay. I think there were a couple of really good points that she raised, but there was loads of key moments there where Jacob Rees-Mogg was pivoting away from the points that was being made, not answering questions, essentially saying a bunch of stuff that was completely untrue. He wasn't questioned on it. He wasn't properly scrutinized for it, and he wasn't held to specific points and specific questions that were being asked, and was allowed to pivot and gish gallop. And I think that reflected poorly on Marina Purkiss in this interview. I really do, which is a shame because I genuinely really like her, and I agree with the things that she was trying to say there as well.